Welcome everybody to the Digital Services Forum call. We have a couple topics today. They're different topics. They're not really related. So what we're going to do is we're going to break it up into 30-minute chunks and talk about these two different areas. And I'm going to talk about some of the stuff in the beginning that I'm working on for no code, low code, or what some of you might be referring to as citizen development. And then we're going to have a second speaker, Dan Grady, come in, and he's going to speak to us on the second half. So if today's your first time, we always like to keep a really active chat in the web meeting. So if you go ahead and just go down to your chat and introduce yourself to the group, we have a really active chat that we always go back and look at afterwards to make sure that we're getting the right topics and we're answering any lingering questions that we may have, because some people don't really want to chime in on the group. So definitely go ahead and introduce yourself, where you're from, and if you're here for your first time, what you're here for. That'd be great. So today, just to give you a quick look at the agenda, I'm going to be the speaker for the first half, and then Dan Grady for the second half. And I'm going to go right into a low code, no code workflow that I'm working on with a few of my customers today. And for those of you that don't know, I'm a senior executive enterprise architect, and I work in state and local government. So the examples that I usually use are with state and local government or higher education sometimes. Without further ado, I'm going to jump right into the topic so we can get rolling, because it is 30 minutes. So I'm going to pack a lot into the 30 minutes. The part that we want to look at is not really no code, low code, right? But the reason we're doing this is to be able to get services out quicker and be able to expand our development capacity. So if we look at deploying a digital service, and again, I come from the side of this where I'm looking at it in the context of a government. So a government for constituent services, I'm going to use that as an example. So a state government might have anywhere between 800 and 1,400 services that they offer to their citizens. Okay, so in the beginning, you have to conceptualize it, design and create it, launch the service, and then make sure you're assessing it and improving it as you go. So that's the value stream that we want to get. It's really relevant to the product cycle, right? We want to keep going and improving on that product as we move through. Now, as we go in, the way we usually do it today is we request that service, right? So a lot of what I've been looking at here is, how is this done today? Where are we getting stuck? Is it the demands or the ideas coming in? Where are we getting stuck in this area? And then on the design side, we come down, and this is when development has accepted that request. And then we come in and we start working on it. So we start asking a lot of questions around, how long it takes to get to this point. So you get the developer to pick it up and start looking at what you need and suggesting technology. Then we go ahead and launch it, right? And when we launch it, we basically have to get it through that release cycle and test cycle, and then into the MVP, into the the production environment. And then we're kind of starting phase 2 of it, ideally, right, where we're looking at, what do we do next with this? How do we improve on it? So the part I want to talk about today is, it takes a long time and a lot of writing and a lot of different records to get here, to get to a point where we have a prototype of the service. And some of the low code, no code, what I want to do is look at a suggestion for getting there faster. All right, so before we go in, I want to show you the use case that I've been working on, and then kind of talk about where we are with it a little bit. So we're looking at, instead of this, like I've seen this take 6 or 8 months sometimes, depending on the size of the service, it might be warranted. Other times it's just a little silly thing that people need with a form and a workflow in order to get there. And it's just a lot of paperwork. Right. So to get to this phase, I can't tell you how long it is in your area, or it's different where we go, but to get to that point is really tough. And I think this is a good point where we can bring in citizen development, or low code, no code. So the idea here is to work towards a 15-minute prototype. And that's what I've been working on a little bit. And I'm going to demo this to you in the environment where I am with it right now. But basically what it is coming in and being able to request a new service. And I'm going to use the citizen example, right? So there's an agency coming in a state government, and they need a new service for their agency. So they're gonna be able to ask for it, but I'm going to ask for a little bit of different things here because of where I'm heading. So I'll show you that in our environment. So if you want to go into the forum instance, right, I can get you, you can go and look at this stuff that I have today. So I'm caught up in this area here where after that request comes in, I want to do two things. I want to make sure that I come in and I say, this is a new service request, or like in government, you might have a license permit or an information request. And then it kicks off a workflow like any request does. And that workflow, I want it to build the actual application for that new request that they're asking for. Right. So basically what it would do is it kick off here and it would run. For those of you who haven't seen it, I'm going to explain a little bit about what an application is. But right now I can't get the flow. I can't have one workflow that would go down and actually build an application for me that I would be able to hand off to a citizen developer. Okay, the idea here is after this workflow kicks off and it builds the application template. So it gives that citizen developer a place to work in an environment that's completely confined. So we're not just giving them open access to a dev environment. We're giving them access specifically to an application that they're able to work on with guardrails around that application. So it's basically scoped app, right? For those of you that have done development before. So after that flow kicks off, what will happen is in this, I'm asking who the developer is, right? Who is that citizen developer that wants to work on this new thing? And then what we're doing is we're going in, we're sending out a welcome to the team notice to that person that requested that they be able to develop their own constituent service. And after that happens, they'll get access, go to your app, they'll get access to an environment where they can start to develop things like their record producers or their workflows, right? They get access to the App Engine Studio, which is meant for these low-code developers or citizen developers. Okay, but the thing that scares dev on this, or it scares the ServiceNow administrators, right, is just giving them access to a dev environment. And that's what we want to avoid here. We want to put a little bit more guardrails than that. So in this DEQ permit test 1, this is actually an application that I built with this workflow so that I can really confine that developer, but still give them the freedom to see what's going on. Now, because the template, when they deployed the template, and I know that a license and permit needs a record producer, what you could actually do is you can let them see what that looks like in prod. So you can say, look, here's the start of your licensing and permit request, which is this right here. You can see it in test, but then you could come in here and edit it. You can edit it in App Engine Studio. But again, they're only editing within that scope, and they're only editing in a development environment. Right. So the idea here is that we don't even bother development or architects or anybody at this point. We just give them access right away to start building their prototype. Even if it's just the form, that's fine, right? If it's just the form for now, and then later you want to train them how to do some basic workflows. But this is how we enable some of those other people to come in and do this with a controlled scope. Okay, so some of the benefits that we've been looking at, right? If we can get to this point, departments, they get a lot of autonomy. Like a lot of people get frustrated waiting, frustrated filling out lengthy forms on, hey, let's build user stories and do all these things. So a lot of times you're able to get this to them right away. And what Gartner says on citizen development is that we can increase our dev capacity up to 65%. And that's just a number I pulled off the Gartner site. So I don't know how true that is or if anybody's actually realized that benefit. But that's what we're really after, right? A big dev capacity improvement. The other thing is we avoid frustrations. We're giving them immediate access to common prototypes. So there's no waiting when we give them. In this case, it's a very specific thing. It's a government constituent request that I'm giving to a citizen. The app is easy access by development. So what could happen here is development could come in and they already have the scope, right? So they could see what everybody did. They don't have to go chasing update sets and say, oh, what did they do in that dev environment? Because I gave them access, right? You're not trying to figure that out anymore because you're controlling the access they have to that specific scope. You also have a nice package, right? So you can deploy this either using GitHub. Because of the scope, you're able to push it up into source control. You're able to do all the things you need after you develop it to make sure that that's controlled. And not only is it controlled here, but it's also controlled here. Like if the developer makes changes, but then that citizen developer, that person in that other department wants to come in and make some changes, they're still able to do it because you still maintain that scope as you go. Okay. We can also automate beyond these things. We can automate some of the architecture and really improve what we're looking at here. So what we're really looking at, the parts on this released new digital service, the parts that we're looking at improving are from when you conceptualize it, right? Instead, there's a lot of stories and demands and all those things. What we let people do is go right to that catalog, and usually through a mediary. Like in the States, we have these people called like IT liaisons. They go out into all the different agencies and they say, look, this is what IT can offer you. Right. So this would be a liaison explaining that this is a good idea. If you want to do your own development, you can get started right away. And so what we're really trying to do is shorten the time to here to that prototype, which can be developed by a non-developer. You don't have to wait for development anymore. So this is where you see the real big improvements, where some areas, and again, I work in government, so a little bit of a caveat. I mean, this could take like 6 or 8 months to get to a prototype because of all the paperwork required up front. But if people could see a prototype very quickly, you're really going to increase their confidence on the ability of that IT organization to deliver what they need. The other area where there's a significant improvement is down here, because now a lot of times if you do give them control in the beginning and it's a non-developer doing some of that, even if you just say you can only edit the form, right, which developers don't really want to sit there and build forms anyway, right? In the beginning, you can do that piece. But then here, if they want to go in and change, oh, I named that field wrong. Well, they should be able to come in and still do that here because you're still controlled in that scope and they still have access to that scope and development. All right, so looking at it a little bit more specifically, I'm going to actually go into the environment and show you, because I know some of you have access to our environment. And if you don't have access, you can send me an email and I'll give you access to this environment that I'm going to demo on today. So this is the DS Forum instance. And we probably have about 175 admins on this now. So I just let everybody in so that they could actually use what we're showing if anything's of interest, right? So where I started on this is I started developing that 15-minute. I was a little bit bolder in the beginning. I said, I'm going to develop a 15-minute MVP. So I'm not really calling it an MVP anymore. I'm calling it a prototype. And this is a scoped app in itself. So eventually I'm going to push this scoped app up to a Git repo so that people could get started with it if they want to. So basically what this contains is it contains the catalog item for Constituent Connect, that one I showed you in the PowerPoint here. And it contains the basic fields that we need to get started. So in my case, I have a couple different templates because it's going to depend, the application template that I use when I get started, it's going to depend on, let me show you in here. It's going to depend on what type of constituent service they want. So is it a service request? Is it a request for information? Like I need a copy of my marriage certificate, or is it a license or permit? Or there might be other types of services that I let them build here, depending on which stubs I have. And so it's a service request. I can do different things to pull those service requests down. I would be able to add different fields here that I would be able to put these fields directly into their catalog item right from the beginning so they could see that in prod. I can also add things in here, like on my template. I could say add a map into my catalog item or add a payment, right? Because in government, most of these things, if it's a permit or if it's an information request, it might cost you $5 or $10, right? To get that information request, or as we go on, there's different things. So the state may have an integration with a certain payment provider or a certain GIS provider, or maybe even a digital signature. So what I can do here with my app template is I could say, as you click on these different things, I'm just going to do that for you up front. Like by virtue of you asking me for a permit with a payment in it or for a permit with a map in it, so I can tell you where the map is, I could build that for you. I could automate that build for you. So when you go in, it's already started. And so you want to get as much of the information up front so that you can actually build that prototype for them before they start. Now, the next thing, the part that I haven't figured out here, I'm just keeping track of time for Dan, is when we come down here, I want to kick off. So once this request gets submitted, constituent connect, and now I know the type of permit they want. I know a little bit that they want a payment or they want a map in there. The next thing I want to do is these workflows are going to run. So it's going to build the map is the one workflow. It's going to look and see, is it a service request, an information request, or a license permit? So it'll know the request type. And then it needs to kick off this workflow. So there's one application template that builds a information request, one that builds a license and permit. So I built those templates out. This is manual right now. I still can't get this automated. So I'm still working on that piece. But so I'm going to show you the one workflow, which is really basic. And then I'll show you this second workflow that comes from an app template. Has anybody on the phone used app templates before? If you just click in the comments or raise your hand. Has anybody used these? Okay. All right, so I'll show you that real quick, and then let's go back to the environment. So we go back to the environment. The workflow that I have is pretty simple for get a new app. So what I'm doing is I'm just taking that catalog variables off from the constituent request, and I'm able to say, okay, what service type is it? And then from the service type, I'm able to make a decision on it's a service request, information request, or a license and permit. And then I'm able to, what I'm trying to do here is execute that application template depending on the type it is. So let me talk about application templates really quick because I'm just going to introduce this. So the application templates are in App Engine Studio. And what a template is here is I can use this template for a new government. So this is a new license and permit. So I can use this template and I'm going to kick it off manually. And I'm just going to call this 1, 2, 3, 4. And then what this will do is it'll go ahead and create an app for me. Again, so it's creating its scope and it's taking all of the things that I put in the template in order to build a new license or permit. So now what I can do is in this app home, what I can do is these are all the things that it created. So now what I can do manually or automated, right? Ideally automated, is I could start building out the people. So who are going to be the contributors on this team? So I can add somebody as a contributor, and I could say they're an editor for this app, and then I could send this, and it would actually, they'd get the notification. So Lou, if Lou's on the phone, he might have just got an email from me saying, hey, you could come in and work on this app right now. Right. So I basically assigned Lou permissions to work on the 1, 2, 3, 4 license and permit app that has all these things built out already. So when he comes in, he already has an environment that's working. he already has 6 experiences built, including playbooks and record producers, right? Whatever you put in there, that template would deploy it for you. Okay, so this is really the meat and potatoes of it, right? Is that you can get them as a developer with developing a template. If you can get them 60, 70% of the way there, so their prototype is started when they come in, and you're not asking somebody to come in as a citizen developer and create their own app and do their own work, right? I'm not even hiding this from the citizen developers. I'm not letting them create their own app. They can only ask me for an app through that liaison and through that request. And then I'll give them permission to edit the 1, 2, 3, 4 app, right? Like I just sent to Lou, but I'm not going to let those ServiceNow administrators or developers, I'm not going to let them do their own thing. And so it's a really good way to allow citizen development in a very controlled manner. So now at some point, Lou might come in and change the form. He might add a form. He might do a couple things that he learned how to do in citizen development, right? So he'd be working in this environment here, which is the low code, no code environment. But then Lou might say at a point, I want to promote this, right? So the part that I haven't worked out yet, but at some point he might say, look, I got this where I want it, John. I want to promote this now to a developer so I can get it released. So now what would happen is he could push that code now back to me, right? There'd be another request where he'd come back and send it to the development team. And then the development team is not going to use App Engine Studio likely. What the development team is going to come in and they're going to use more of the traditional development environment, right? Because this gives you a little bit more flexibility to do a lot of different code. So they might come in and they might say, okay, let me go ahead and look at that. What did Lou actually do? So now they can go into the 1, 2, 3, 4 app and actually see that Lou added these forms or Lou added a record producer, right? And they'd be able to do all the stuff and say, is this thing really worthy or is it close to being what we need to promote it into a production environment? Because the idea here is that only the developer doesn't even see it, right? Until they get to a point where they're serious enough. And maybe that liaison, like in my case, I have liaisons from central IT going out to the agencies. So maybe in my case, I say, when that liaison says it's at a good point, then I want to get development and architecture eyes on it, right? Only at that point do I want them to come in and look at it if they choose this path, right? And not the traditional path, which is, give me a demand, and then I'm going to get you a developer to come in and look at what this might look like in production, right? So I can land it in development in the right directory, right? So that I could actually see my catalog item and I could actually have the workflow. So we're not engaging development at all in the beginning part of this cycle. We're bringing them in later after the prototype is developed. Okay, I got a few things here and oh, good, Dan's on too. So I'll hand it off to you in a minute, Dan.
Sounds good. And I realize I do have the share option. I thought I might need to be promoted to presenter, but I'm good.
You're good to go. Okay. I'll just finish it up on the last one here. So the last piece I have here really is step 4. Part of that template, which is really unique to these app templates, right, is that I will give a catalog item that's actually in production. So they're not in production, in the service catalog. So in this case, this is the default government portal. So just like there's a marriage license here, they would have that permit, that new permit, they'd be able to see it in the portal and they'd be able to go and actually access the form that started. So even though they might not have put anything on the form yet, a couple default fields might be there, or they might have clicked on map in the catalog item. So we embed the map for them. This way we fill out the form of the address they're clicking on underneath. So a lot of these things we could pre-build. And the 3 that I see in government a lot are: 1, you usually need to tell me where you need service or where you're going to ask for that permit. 2, you need a way to pay for the permit. And 3, you need a way for a signature in a lot of cases, a digital signature. So that might be, any of the digital signature providers. So these things you can pre-build into the template so that they don't have to say, they don't end up putting name, address fields in there or anything like that. They just use the map instead. So as much as you could do to simplify it in the template, as much as you could pre-build, because 80% of what they need in a template, right? It's the other 20% that they're going to be building later on or ask for your help with. All right, I'm going to go through. So again, the benefits are in here. I'm going to share this deck out. This is a quick overview. I have some more on this that actually talks about the team. So this goes back to last week. There's actually a product manager that would be doing this, right? A product manager would be managing Constituent Connect and saying, how do I get more people to use this prototype feature? The developer, that product manager rather, of Constituent Connect, they work with the liaison team, who's the one that promotes it, who's the one that says, hey, we got this really cool thing. You don't have to wait 6 months for a prototype. I can get you one this afternoon, right? We need somebody out there telling that story about the features, because that's what you want to do. You want to get a lot of people using a common platform so they're not out there buying apps like crazy, like we have the problem with today. So all that enablement and all those people that would be involved, the developer would be involved because they would probably develop the template that I showed you. So they would be involved in doing all that piece. And then the architect would be involved. We can even automate with CSDM, right? We already know that they're developing a map, right? So they're using Esri in this case. So we know they're connected to Esri on the app service, right? So we know this is a license and permit that uses Esri. We know this is a license and permit that uses ServiceNow. So think about automating the building of the basic architecture that we would need to support this service ongoing. Right? So not only can we automate that development piece and get to that prototype, but we can also give you a stub of the architecture. And you saw where we gave you a stub of what a developer would need to actually carry this into prod. So that's a quick overview. I'm going to hand it over to Dan now, but this is something I've been working on. If there's any interest in this, I'm working with some other architects on it too, so we can get connected and start talking about this. But that's really the phase we're at. We haven't implemented this anywhere yet. And as you can see, I'm still working out some of the things with the workflows to get those app templates kicked off. But I think it's a really nice way to deploy that citizen development or low code, no code without being too afraid of just letting people into your dev environments. So any questions, I'll be on while Dan speaks, I'll be in the chat. And if you have anything that you want to ask on this or get in touch or download this, I'll have it up by Monday. I'll have this recording up with this presentation so that you can use it yourselves to kick it around and see if it's of interest internally. Thanks, everybody. And I'll hand it over to Dan, and he's going to talk to us about process mining. So we're going to take a pretty big shift here.
Well, actually, process mining can be applied to applications built with creator workflows on the ServiceNow platform, so you can identify inefficiencies in your custom applications and continually improve them. Actually, a funny story about that. Well, not funny, but true story. Chris Betty actually has made the statement that process mining allows us to innovate faster because he's not worried about getting the process 100% right the first time. Now that he knows he's going to have visibility into kind of how it's performing and where it's going off the rails from day one with process mining in place. So it's actually a very good tie-in to, there's a nice tight relationship between process mining and custom applications potentially created by citizen developers. So I don't know how you set this up, John, but just to introduce myself to the group, my name is Dan Grady. I'm part of the product team here at ServiceNow, focused on our in-platform process mining solution, but I have been with ServiceNow. I just got my Bill McDermott email today for my 8-year anniversary. And the majority of that time has been spent working with customers when it comes to anything analytics, AI, machine learning on the ServiceNow platform. And I saw some familiar names in the attendee list. What my goal today is to just run you through what process mining is. Part of my responsibility is to kind of make sure the ServiceNow community is educated on the offering, why it's important, what makes it different than some of the stuff you may be doing in the past. And I always like to start these sessions with this quote. Do the best you can until you know better. Then when you know better, do better. And I love the quote because it usually aligns to the reason that we've all gathered here today, right? To learn a little bit more about ServiceNow platform, take that knowledge, go out, apply it, get more value out of our customers' investment with ServiceNow. But it also will align to the solution that we'll be talking about here today, process mining, which is designed to help us automate that process of x-raying the workflows you have running on the ServiceNow platform and start to show you where and how you could be doing better for everyone involved with them. Now, what I planned, I got a little bit of a why and what of process mining just to kind of level set and get us all kind of on the same page on what it is. Then I'll jump right into an instance and we'll do a little demonstration. And if we have time, I'm going to do the demonstration in two phases. One is I'll show you how somebody would use what we call the process mining workspace to dig in and analyze and understand and identify process inefficiencies. And then one of the biggest benefits to our in-platform approach to process mining is the speed in which people can get started with this. I always joke that if you can dodge a wrench, you can dodge a ball, or if you can build a ServiceNow report, you can visualize your processes in a matter of minutes. So most of our customers already have the skills they need to do what you're about to see here today. I'm going to show you how we've done that. Then, it's always good to get a sense of, once you see this, like what's coming next. So I figured I'd run you through a little bit of what's coming in Xanadu. And then there is no shortage of opportunity to learn more about this out there on the ServiceNow community page. Specifically for process mining. So I'll just run you through some additional resources if you're interested as well. That's the plan. And then obviously I'm always happy to take questions and answer as much as I can for you here today. Because we'll be talking about Xanadu, I do have to throw the slide up there. I didn't know what the rules were, John, for the call, I'm assuming, but this is the slide that says, hey, anything I say and do here today can't be held against me in the court of law. It is also the slide that says, hey, if we happen to talk about things that are coming, and we will be doing that, make no purchasing decisions. I'm assuming you've read the fine print. Awesome. So, like with everything we do in life, whether it be a meeting like this one or a business process, we have a vision in our head, a plan for how it should play out. And when we design processes, we design them for both completeness and efficiency to provide the best experience possible for as many people as possible. Now, unfortunately, what we design isn't always what plays out in reality. The reality is not all work is going to be flowing through the optimal path, and that's going to have a negative impact on the experience both people requesting a service are having, as well as the people trying to deliver that service. The challenging part is actually seeing the reality of what's going on and getting an understanding of it so we can actually improve that process, make it better over time. If you think about it, for many, continual improvement is a very manual, time-consuming, and costly effort, right? It usually involves running a whole bunch of reports, and some people still like to print those reports out and go through them line by line with a highlighter. Don't know why they do that, but they do it. It may involve running in-person or virtual workshops in which we take a whole bunch of sticky notes and we put them up on a wall. Then, of course, somebody's got to snap a picture of those sticky notes on the wall and post it to some internal site because, like, hey, did work really happen unless we have a picture of sticky notes on a wall somewhere? It may involve bringing in some third party to help us out. Super helpful, but they're not free. And then once we get through all that, we still have to get internal alignment on the optimal path forward. And at the speed in which most organizations are trying to move these days, by the time they get through all of this, the optimal path forward may have already changed. And this is where process mining comes in. Process mining automates that ability of showing us the reality of what's going on inside of our workflows, showing us where the bottlenecks are, the ping-ponging situations, the rework in the process, where all the inefficiencies are. And now that we have that accelerated visibility into the reality, that's going to speed up our ability to make the necessary changes to improve that process, to drive more productivity back into the organization. Now, for some, like I mentioned, I've been here for about 8 years now. And most of the time I've been talking about dashboards. I have some customers that say, whoa, Dan, how is this different than the dashboards that we have with performance analytics and reporting? They give us visibility into how our processes are performing. And they're right. And I would hope that our customers are using our performance analytics and reporting to answer very important questions like how many tickets, cases, incidents, whatever it might be, did we work? Which types were they? How long did it take to close them? And probably most importantly, how are we performing against our targets and are we improving our cycle times? All super important questions that we hope our customers are using dashboards just like this to ask and answer. But here's the deal. I've been doing this a little while now, and I've learned one important thing. Information is one of the most addictive and contagious things out there. You give somebody a little bit and they always want more. So the first thing that happens when we get a dashboard like this out the door, before we can even high-five each other that we got it out the door, somebody in leadership is asking us questions like, well, why are we missing our CSAT or ESAT targets? Why are our closure times trending in those directions? Like why? And the answer to those follow-up why questions, they don't always live in dashboards like this. This is where process mining comes in. Process mining allows us to start asking and answering all those follow-up why questions about what we're seeing on those higher level dashboards. Things like, where is the process getting stuck? Where is there any sort of unnecessary rework happening? Where are we spending or wasting the most time? Or which vendors are speeding us up or which ones are slowing us down? Or my favorite one, I've been asked for this report so many times over the years here at ServiceNow, I've actually given it a name. I like to call it the finger pointing report. Everybody wants to know who's holding on to the tickets the longest. I need to know who's holding on to the tickets the longest. Or if you're a more glass half full person, we call that the opportunity to improve report. These are all the types of questions that process mining allows us to start asking and answering. Essentially, we like to say that process mining gets us to the why behind our process KPIs. And we can apply this process mining solution to a single table process like this incident example here, where we're looking at how incidents are moving from state to state within the process and the volume and velocity there. Or if you happen to be using us or a customer happens to be using us for a more robust workflow, like an HR onboarding case, a life cycle event with multiple activity sets and sub requests and tasks that come off of that, we can apply something we call multidimensional mining that gives us end-to-end visibility into that entire process. These multidimensional maps, super useful when we start looking for bottlenecks in our request processes. If you think about where the two primary bottlenecks are in a request process, is really two places: the approval step and the fulfillment tasks themselves. And if you think about that, those two things live in two different tables on the ServiceNow platform. The approvals typically live at the requested item level, and the fulfillment tasks are in the SE task table. Reports can show us the overall time spent on a request, but process mining allows us to look at where is that time being spent. Is it waiting for somebody to approve it? Is it in the fulfillment tasks themselves? Being able to put these two things side by side on a map really help us understand where we're leaking air from a productivity perspective and where we can start plugging some gaps and improving that process for folks. And then lastly, as of the Vancouver release, we've opened this process mining capability up to allow customers to import external process data into ServiceNow and apply process mining to it. So the example that you're looking at on the screen here happens to be process data pulled from Smart Recruiters for a hiring process, and we're able to apply process mining on top of that to start looking for bottlenecks in that process here at ServiceNow, actually. But that ability to open it up is something that's available in the Vancouver release. And then in the Washington release, we actually just open it up even more to allow you to create those multi-dimensional maps with both internal ServiceNow data as well as external data for situations where you want end-to-end visibility into a process that might be touching both ServiceNow and someplace else. I'll just pause here before I jump into a little demonstration piece. Any questions, comments, thoughts about anything that we've covered so far? Actually, I should ask, I don't know, John, how these calls typically go. Do we open it up for questions, or do we just put them in the chat?
Yeah, I'll watch the chat for you. So if there are any questions that come up, anybody using it or want to come off mute, that's fine too.
Awesome. All right, I'll jump over here to a little bit of a demonstration.
Here's one for you, Dan.
Oh, yeah, sure. Go ahead.
Can process mining be applied to any task table?
Yeah, so the technical requirement for process mining is, in ServiceNow at least, is audit log data. Actually, I'll take one step back. Technically, there's three key things from a data perspective we need for process mining. You need these three values. You need a unique identifier, an incident, right? Or if it's an external system, maybe a claim ID, a patient ID, or something like that, a job requisition for that hiring example. You need a unique identifier. You need something called an activity, or in some process mining circles, they call it an event. Like, what is the thing that's changing on that unique record over time? Very often, we're just looking at state changes, but I'll show you an example today when we look at assignment group changes. Then the third thing you use is timestamp for when that change took place. Now, lucky for us in ServiceNow, all of that data lives in the audit log table. So every time a record on ServiceNow changes, like the state changes, the assignment group changes, we capture that data in the audit log table. So for ServiceNow, we're just harvesting data from the audit log table. Auditing is turned on by default for task, and I think something like 150 plus tables across the platform. And then, for most customers, they specifically have to go to turn auditing off if they don't want it on. For your custom example, like you're building a custom application, that's one area. If you're thinking longer term and you think you're going to be using process mining on top of a custom application, just ensure that you have auditing turned on for that the tables in that app, and you can apply process mining to it. So yes, it works on tasks.
Okay,
Because they have. There we
one
go.
more for you.
Yeah.
Is it a plugin or it's its own scoped app, or how
Sure.
does it work? Like,
Yeah. So the way that it's packaged, it is a plugin. You can go out and get it on the store. There's a core process mining plugin. You can install it in your sub-production instances, and you can mine up to 3,600 records in your sub-production instance. There's also content packs for the individual workflows on the platform. So for ITSM, CSM, and the industry flavors, HR, field service management, strategic portfolio management. We have content packs, and you'll see this in the demonstration that just give you some common process improvement or inefficiencies that we see. They come bundled in these content packs. So those are usually most customers turn on two plugins, the core process mining one, and then there's a content pack for whatever workflow that they're entitled to mine.
okay.
And from just a packaging perspective, process mining is bundled with ITSM Enterprise and CSM Enterprise and all the industry flavors of that CSM Enterprise. But we also have broken process mining out as its own thing for those customers who say, you know what, I don't want to go all the way to enterprise, but this process mining thing is super cool, super valuable. I want it. There's an add-on SKU that they can use to get entitlement to process mining.
Excellent. So Sarah, Alan, Mike, did that get all your questions answered? I'm not going to answer the pricing one, so. Okay. Sarah says yes. Mike, you good? And Alan's good. He gave a thumbs up. Okay.
Perfect. All right. So I like to start these demonstrations inside a performance analytics dashboard. You do not need to be using performance analytics to use process mining, but they are very complementary solutions, right? The what and then the why. So you might be on a dashboard just like this, and you might see, let's say, your resolution times on the rise. And then in a single click, you'd be able to drill down into the process mining workspace to get a better understanding of what might be causing that, right? And I'm going to give you a little bit of a harbor tour of what you're seeing here in the process mining workspace. I'm just going to move people's faces out of the way for now. In this case here, what we've done is we've mined 21,000 incidents, 21,400 incidents actually. And they've taken 1,500 different routes to get to closure. Now, what we're looking at on the screen here is we give the person who mined this data inside of this process mining project a view into kind of the average completion time of those 24,000 records over time, and then a distribution of kind of the different buckets it took from a closure time perspective. This is the out-of-the-box dashboard that we provide, or visualizations we provide. But then customers also have this ability to start to add their own metrics and KPIs to this same view. The idea being we want to keep the person doing the analysis aligned to the higher level KPIs that we're trying to influence over time. And for incidents, obviously, you're going to have your MTTR, your backlog, and your average age most likely. But completely configurable, you want to tell that complete story to the person doing the analysis. Now, as we move down the screen, we get to what is my favorite part of the solution. Everybody loves the visualized process maps, and they're awesome, and we'll look at that in a second. But we also package up as part of those content packs that I was mentioning, these pre-configured improvement opportunities, or we call them under the covers finding definitions. And these are just common inefficiencies that we see across customers, and they come in two flavors, rule-based and automated, and I'll walk you through both. The first example here is of those 21,000 records that we mined there, we flagged this one here, these incidents that are going into the awaiting caller info state at some point in their life cycle. And there was 8,100 or 38% of the incidents that we mined went into the awaiting caller info state. And probably the most important number here is this 42 years of total inefficiency. There's 42 years worth of time packaged up in just these incidents going in and out of that awaiting caller info state. Like even if a customer could reclaim 1% of that 42 years, that's going to be a win for them. And then right from here, they'd have this ability to drill into the visualized process map for just those 8,100 or 8,200 incidents. Like just jumpstart them on their analytics journey and prioritize where to start their digging, their further digging into this. This is an example of a rule-based one. And I say it's an example of a rule-based one because we specifically configured it to say, go find us the situations in which an incident touches the state of awaiting caller info. Now, the next one on the list here is an example of an automated finding or improvement opportunity. It's telling us that it found rework on the in progress state, meaning that an incident went into the in progress state, left it, and then at some point in its life cycle came back to the in progress state. And in fact, it found at least one incident that did that 11 times. So there was 2,000 of these, and there's 33 years worth of time packaged up in just that rework scenario of going in and out of the in progress state. Again, an opportunity to improve. And that, I call that one an automated one, is because it's just looking for a process pattern. We have these inefficiency detectors or pattern detectors that we've rolled out. One of them is rework. So it looks for situations in the process where a process goes A, B, C, back to A, let's say, and it will flag all those situations. We have a ping pong detector that looks for things that are going A, B, A, B, A, B. Very handy when we look at assignment group scenarios. We have an extra step detector where it finds patterns that go A, B, C, D, F, and then a variant that goes A, B, C, D, E, F. And it says, hey, we noticed this one additional step for this bucket of work, slowing you down. You might want to look at those. So there's 7 of these detectors now as of Washington, and they're just meant for those situations where we don't know what we don't know. And then we flag them, we put them on this list, we prioritize them by the total of inefficiency time. They may be interesting to you, they might not. Just like a dating app, you either swipe left or swipe right, depending on whether they're important to you or not, or you're interested, and you move forward. But the idea is they're really helpful in jump starting you in terms of where you might want to start continuing your conversation with the data. I always like to compare these to when I was playing hide and seek as a kid. When I was playing hide and seek as a kid, when I was at home, I knew the 2 or 3 best hiding spots. So when I was 8, I was way more efficient at finding my friends than they were at finding me. Same is true with a lot of our customers, right? They have a pretty good idea of where their inefficiencies are. They just haven't had a good way to get the data they need to quantify the impact so they can prioritize which ones to act on first, right? No shortage of opportunities to improve, but you need data to help you start understanding where you should focus your efforts first. So that's the summary and insights page. Then, of course, we get over to the process map. I'll just give you a little bit of a harbor tour of some of the things that you can do inside of here. Same data as before, right? And I can come in here and just expand this out. I've got my 21,000 incidents, my 1,500 different routes. And you can say that doesn't look like 1,500 routes, and I can make it really messy really fast if I expand this out. Then your GRC people get really scared and squirrely because like all those little lines could be risk. What you're looking at on this example here or in this map here is you're just looking at how things are moving from state to state within the process and the volume and velocity between those transitions. Now, for me, the first time I saw a map like this, I had no idea what I was looking at, but they kind of reminded me of ski trails. And if I think back to when I used to ski, anytime I started going down the mountain and then I had to go back up the mountain, certainly wasn't the best experience for me, and it definitely wasn't the fastest way to get down the mountain. So I always start to look for these lines that are going back up the hill because they represent some form of rework in the process. And in this case here, we got this these awaiting caller info back to the state of in progress. And I can see that I have about 2,600 unique occurrences of that, 3,300 total occurrences, meaning about 700 incidents took that trip more than once. And then I got one of them that took the trip 9 times. And then probably the most important number is this 18 years of total duration, right? Packaged up in things just going from awaiting caller info to in progress. Crazy thing there is that things don't start out in awaiting caller info. They have to get there. So what can you do, right? You can use this bottleneck analysis to come over here and say, show me all the situations in which there's a transition that involves the state of awaiting caller info. And here's the one that we were just looking at, 18 years. Here's the other half of that, 21 years from in progress to awaiting caller info. So what you can do is you can actually come in here and then click on this and say, hey, only show me or narrow it down to only the tickets that touch the state of awaiting caller info at some point in their life. So now it narrows it down to those 8,200. You might remember, or that 8,173, you might remember that from the summary and insights page. I could have just jumped right to here by clicking on that, but I wanted to show you a little bit more of the interactivity. Then, of course, I can use these breakdowns on the left-hand side of the screen to start slicing and dicing these 8,200 incidents that go into the state of awaiting caller info at some point in their life. And one of the ways we usually look at these things that touch awaiting caller info or go into on hold is the intake channel, right? Because if we can improve the intake experience, we may be able to eliminate some of the back and forth. And I can see that the majority of these things came in via self-service and portal, but check out this email channel. There's a whole additional week packaged up in things that come in via email and go into awaiting caller info. So maybe we want to focus in on those. Kind of makes sense, right? Email is a pretty unstructured channel. You expect some back and forth, but a whole week, like we could totally do better. Then I can do some other things, right? Now that I've narrowed it down, I can use this histogram to look at the situations where that happened and went into waiting column for 2, 3, 4, or 5 times. I can start to look at, let's say, the individual records themselves, right? Benefit of being in the platform is being able to get down to those detailed records. Maybe we want to start using some clustering to look at the short descriptions, the descriptions, all that unstructured data in these. And we can start to see that, hey, I've got this cluster of tickets in which people are sending in emails about updating their email address in their profile. Like that's totally something we should have a catalog item for, or some sort of self-service. So what we can do next to close the loop, now that we found an opportunity, is we can come in here and we can add a note and say, hey, at so-and-so, John, take a look at intake for email update, attach a snapshot, you'll get notified. You click the link, it brings you into this project. You hit the preview button, it takes you to the same place in the analysis that I was. And then there's also a connection here with continual improvement management and automation center. I think I saw a former session that you had, John, on automation center, but the idea is when you start using something like process mining, there's going to be like no shortage of opportunities. As I've said, you can't act on them all, but you want to make sure that you capture the opportunities so they get tracked, prioritized, and followed up on. This allows you to start either creating new initiatives or linking to existing ones to make sure that things don't get lost in the shuffle. I know that was a lot, and I kind of probably went pretty quickly. Any questions, comments, thoughts that have come up in the chat there, John?
Yeah, Alan was asking about the duration for, like, it's 21,000 records we're looking at in this case, up in the upper left there. But how long is it? Like over 6 months, or it doesn't really matter? Or
Yeah, you can configure it. We'll actually, I mean, with the time here, we can create a project real quick. But you configure it just like you're configuring a report. Like you can run this on one record if you wanted to. Like that's, we were talking about the creator workflows situation, right? If you just roll an app out, one record through it, you could run a project or create a project against it and see it. Usually we look at like a month or a quarter's worth of time for a given process and a subset of the data, just to get that gives us a good amount of data and an understanding of how the process is performing.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Crawl into it almost at a singular level as part of your post-mortem after a P1 event or something like that, and look where you lost your time. Yeah,
you actually can do. That's a great point. One of the things I didn't show you here, but you can actually do this side-by-side comparison. So what you can do is you can do before and after a process change to see what the potential impact of it, and you can start to look at like any of the changes. The increase in the average duration, the decrease. So you can start doing these side-by-side comparisons, different teams, different regions. But very often it becomes the same process over time, like before and after, or a different version of the process. Very handy for looking for adverse effects of a process change. So real quick, in Washington, we rolled out this guided setup for creating a project. So it's, like I said, kind of just like building a report. You kind of say, okay, here's my project. What table do you want to mine? Any table that has auditing turned on is going to be available to us. And we just kind of come in here. We'll say create project for the incident table. And then you just start scoping your data, right? Maybe we only want to look at human generated incidents. Maybe we only want to look at incidents that were part of that P1 scenario you were talking about there. So what you do is you come in here and you just add some filter criteria. You want to be focusing on work that's completed the process, right? You don't want to be comparing open and closed work together. Your durations get all wonky. You're comparing apples and oranges there, but you just keep coming in here like you're building a report, maybe a certain time period, certain category, whatever it may be. I don't really have to worry about that. I don't have a ton of data in this instance. And we hit save. Then the only other thing you absolutely have to do is you need to set your activity definition, right? The thing that is changing over time on the record. Very often, we start with the state activity, right? And look at how things are moving from state to state. But you could totally do this with assignment group. Very popular use case to look at how things are transferring between different teams and the bottlenecks in the transfer process. And then, of course, we're going to want to have our breakdowns, right? Remember, we use channel to look at things coming in via email. You simply come in here and you say, well, what do you want to break this down by? And you can have up to 10 breakdowns per project. And we'll save this. And then we'll choose our improvement opportunities, right? So remember those things on the first page, right? That they come in the content packs, the automated findings and the rule-based ones. We'll just add a whole bunch of these and a whole bunch of these. We'll hit apply to project. Some of them will apply, some of them won't. But that's where those initial findings come, and then we say review and mine. And it will package everything up, give us kind of a little bit of a summary. Great. We say mine project. We're going to do a sample mine. This is going to just mine those 3,600 records that I was mentioning. What happens now, just so you know, based on the criteria that we put in, active is false, it goes out, it harvests the relevant data from the audit logs. It then takes that data, it passes it off to the machine learning infrastructure to do all the heavy duty number crunching. So there's no performance impact on the instance itself. It spits the finished model back into the instance, and then we go on our merry way. And use the project just like you saw me do. This takes anywhere from 30 seconds to a couple of minutes, depending on the volume of the data and our place in line with that shared machine learning infrastructure. But that's the level of effort. Like, that's the thing that gets our customers really excited, is they see the level of visibility that process mining can provide. And then when I walk them through this little wizard here and they see that it's not like rocket science to get going with it, it's a really compelling event. Like, it's not this heavy lift to get started with process mining. While this runs, I'll just pause. Are there any questions that had come in there, John, that you see?
Yeah, Alan was asking, and I'll expand on a little bit, but what about a process that goes into another system, or the whole process in another system?
Yeah. So in that scenario, as of Vancouver, we open this up, and I have just so I don't know if I have a slide on it. Let's see. Yeah, I'll just bring this up. So all that mines. So we have this ability in Vancouver. We open it up. There's a little wizard process that walks through importing the process data from an external system. Basically, use import sets under the covers, but there's some magic that converts it into native audit log records in the platform. So you can, in Vancouver, there's an option to import external process data. In Washington, we opened it up to create those maps, those multidimensional maps that combine ServiceNow data with external process data. Into a single map. And I run these Process Mining Academy sessions on a monthly basis. There's one specifically focused on the external data offering, and it walks through the whole demo of importing the data. And then the most recent one I just ran last month that's out there on the community site is the walking through the process of linking the internal and external together, if you were interested in learning a little bit more after we leave here today.
And that thing you mentioned before about a project, is that specific project for doing the mining activity, right? It's not like a regular project in like.
Yeah, exactly. It's just what we call kind of the configuration, right? So like, you have all these different types of analysis that we're trying to do. Like, hey, okay, here's a project in which we were looking at assignment groups instead of state changes. So it's not like a PPM or a SPM project. It's just the configuration, like we just walked through, to say, what type of analysis do I want to do? Oh, looking at this data with this configuration, boom, 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 boom.
Yeah. Just somebody commented on it. It gets confusing with which project in service.
Yeah. To make it even more confusing, this product used to be called process optimization, and then in Vancouver we renamed it process mining. That was a really fun exercise to go through.
Yeah. And yeah, the process mining community, that's on the forums.
Yep. So there's a specific product hub for process mining.
Can you paste that in the chat, that link right there?
Yeah, sure. I'll paste.
People are asking for it, so that'd be great.
Yeah, we'll put this in the chat. And just while we have this here, just so you can, the top two things are probably the most useful, right? There's the use case, this thing we call the use case series. These are just little 5-minute recordings on how to use process mining to do different things like multi-hop analysis, SLA breach analysis. So that's a pretty handy one. And then there's also the Academy that I was just talking about. And this is those 25 recorded sessions of different aspects of the solution, like doing that external data one. So there's a whole 40-minute presentation on how to do that.
Okay.
The other thing that I'll call out is I just posted this actually for those that are interested, is this guide to getting started with ServiceNow process mining. This is like my own little curriculum of how I would walk somebody through. There's like a 2-minute explainer. The little demo that I just did is out here. There's a recording on how to create your first projects. This is recording on how to use that workspace. And then there's the use case series. So this is also a good article. I might just put that in the chat too for the team.
Hey, Scott, I know we're over, but did you have a question? I didn't see you had your hand up. Sorry about that. Scott, you still there? Did we lose you?
Oh, no question, John. I think I put it up by accident.
Oh, okay.
It was a high five, not a question. A high five.
There you go.
High five. Yeah, great stuff.
Very cool.
Perfect. Well, if anybody has any questions, I mean, I'm out there. I think most people probably know how to navigate the ServiceNow email system, or find me on the community or LinkedIn. I'm happy to follow up and answer anything that you have.
And if you send your deck over, Dan, I post that with the video on our forum. And
Sweet.
so this way anybody can get it. So appreciate you jumping on. That was awesome.
No, I appreciate the opportunity and the audience. Really great. And I hope to see some of you at Knowledge.
All right. I'll see you there.
Thanks, guys. Thanks, John.